Shalom friends, this is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet. You can find my site at www.lovingkindness.co. Welcome to another Shear in Tanya, Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book of the average man, also known as the Likutei Amarim, which means the collection of sayings, because when the Alter Rebbe wrote this work, he really expressed it in a way that he said all he was doing was collecting various sayings and minimizing on the effort that he put in to make this work what it was, in his humility, calling it simply a book of sayings. Now, of course, Alter Rebbe lived from 1745 to 1812, and this is a work which describes the mysteries of the soul, the psychology of the soul, and how we have to work on ourselves with the challenging times between the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Tov, the evil inclination, the good inclination, and more importantly, the animal soul and the godly soul. In chapter 8, where we're at the moment, we're discussing the different aspects of the nature of the animal soul and various things that can occur to it, and how it involves itself in certain things which are positive or negative, and what the consequences are of those things. Very briefly, we broke off for Pesach and we kind of lost track of where we're at. So I want to go back just a couple of sentences to where we were at before, where it says over here, V'al dvarim b'teilim beheter, speaking about things where a person speaks words which are permitted, but the words are of an idle nature. In the last shiur, I also translated this expression as being idle things. But really, even though it's idle words, for example, words that are unnecessary to be said, for example, we should be focusing on the study of Torah. We should be focusing on prayer. We should be focusing on words of kindness, words that are spiritual in effect. But many people spend their day talking idle talk. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they speak negatively, something bad, because that would imply something bad. But instead, they speak words of a trivial nature. They have no real value to them. They're not necessarily prohibited, but when people speak them, it's just to waste time. You know, things like, well, how's the weather? Or what's the weather like there? Or what's the temperature? And we're not saying that that's something bad, but it's called Devarim B'Teilim. And likewise, when a person occupies himself in activities in life, he can also choose to occupy himself in activities that are meaningful and filled with mitzvah observance, goodness, kindness, spirituality. Or alternatively, he can occupy himself in just ordinary things. Now, when one occupies himself in things that are, and especially as it pertains to speech, that's the topic that we're speaking about, we have the principle as follows. Kagon, for example, if we take Am Haaretz, we take an ignoramus, somebody who's not necessarily a Torah scholar, and he is, because of his lack of Torah, he is not able to study. He has to purify himself. He has to purify his soul from this impurity of this Kelipah. As we spoke about before many times, the Kelipah is the husk, the evil husk, the shell, the peel that surrounds the good. And as a result of the person having engaged in idle chatter, he needs to somehow get rid of this impurity that is cleaving to his soul at this point in time. So he has to remove, to purify his soul from this impurity of this particular shell, of this husk, through the process, ultimately, when he dies, of going through this experience of what is called the catapult, being thrown from one side of the world to the other, as we spoke about very briefly in our last shiur. And basically what that means is that the soul is cast out from two aspects of spirituality. One aspect which is good, and another aspect which is bad. The soul is exposed to elements of good, and it sees perfect goodness. And thereafter, just when it realizes what perfect goodness is, it gets thrown into a world where it gets shown what evil is all about. This is a tremendous punishment for the soul. It is not a literal punishment of being catapulted as if one was at a fun fair and they had a ride and one sits on the catapult and they shoot one out from one side to the other, and you land on the other side and you scream out in great excitement as you get thrown through the air, hoping to land on the other side. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about spiritual punishment, a spiritual affliction. And this comes about because a person speaks words which are idle chatter. What's idle chatter? It's the air that is being used to a certain degree in a negative sense. We're expending this air from our mouths and it's achieving nothing. So now we get thrown into a punishment where we are exposed to good and we're exposed to bad, and we get thrown through the air from the one side to the other, so to speak. We experience the good and we experience the bad. And this, of course, is a tremendous punishment. Nevertheless, a person is able to atone for it. Even though what he did is not ideal, it's not the correct thing to do, we shouldn't spend our day involved in idle talk. Nevertheless, there is a way of doing teshuvah. As it's written in the Zohar in Parshas Beshalach in page 59 on side A. However, if a person speaks forbidden speech altogether, for example, he speaks about things that are of a joking, mocking nature, and he speaks evil, defamatory speech against his fellow, and similar to this, these are things which are clearly forbidden. These come from the three completely impure Kelipot. We spoke about this before in the previous Shiurim, that there is good, there is a concept called Kelipah Nogah, which is the translucent or the glowing husk, which means to say that it has features of both good and bad. It has a parav expression to it. We can use it for good, we can use it for bad, and then we have three completely evil Kelipot. Now, when we speak Lashon Hara, we speak defamatory comments about somebody, or we do onas devarim, we need to say that we speak badly about another person in front of them, and we hurt them with the words that we say. Or we speak leitzanos, for example, we speak foolish chatter, silly jokes at the table, levity, unnecessary levity, silly jokes, blaming one type of race against the other, one type of person against the other, the male against the female, the blonde against the brunette, and so on and so forth. We jovial and joking around about all these things. These are forbidden things. These are not just in the aspect of what we called before devarim b'teilim, that they're just idle chatter, but rather these are things that are completely forbidden. Yeah, there's a bigger problem. Then this kafa kela that we're speaking about, this catapult by itself, does not help in purifying and removing the impurity from the soul. It's not good enough. The catapult system only works for a person who was involved in idle chatter, where he used the air for a useless purpose, but not necessarily that he used it for a bad purpose. If, however, he used the air for a bad purpose, then such an individual has to go into the world called Gehennom, which we translate colloquially as being hell. Hell is not, again, the concept of what we imagine hell to be in a physical sense, where there are all these devils standing around with their forks and poking us and so on and so forth. But Gehennom is, in fact, an even worse punishment, because it's the punishment where the soul is exposed to the real bad that it was engaged in, and it knows what real good is. That's frightening. Imagine knowing what real good is, and then knowing that a person himself or herself realizes that what they did is really bad. That's a Gehenna. Imagine being exposed, for example, in a particular situation of doing something wrong, and finding that the whole world knew about the fact that the act that was done was wrong. Well, sometimes we can think about it on an intellectual level and say, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. But imagine that it really did take place. That Gehenna is certainly far worse than any type of Gehenna of some sort of a devil, or whatever we want to speak about, poking one with a fork in the fire, whatever it is. The fire, of course, is the fire that we experience as souls, having undergone the tremendous ordeal and the trauma of realizing that what we've done is wrong. And the only way that we can clean ourselves of the evil, meaning that bad speech, that defamatory speech, and so on and so forth, is through going through this process called Gehenna. Once again, Gehenna is not an evil thing. Gehenna is the process that we need to go through in order to clean ourselves. The process of Kibut HaKever that we spoke about before, this getting whipped, let's say, whatever you call it, getting smacked in the grave, the purgatory of the grave, This is, again, it's not something that is negative, that we're trying to say that it's evil of some kind. But what we're trying to say is it's a certain type of affliction that we have to go through in order to bring ourselves to where we should be, or should have been in the first instance, had we not done the things that we shouldn't have done. And likewise, another case of a person who didn't do the right thing in terms of his speech. A person who it was possible for him to occupy himself in the study of Torah. And he occupied himself in all sorts of, again, devarim b'teilim, idle chatter or irrelevant things, whatever you want to say, but certainly idle chatter. He was sitting with his friends at the table. They had an hour to pass by. And they said, hey, Reuven's talking to Shimon. Shimon, he says, let's pass the time by. What are the latest scores in the tennis? How are things going with the soccer game? What's the weather like? How are things on the other side of the world? And they just engage in all sorts of useless talk just to pass the time by. Actually, when they get up from the table, they are no wiser than they were when they sat down, and they just simply pass the time by speaking about irrelevant things that isn't going to help anything. It's not going to help the world. It's not going to help them. But tomorrow, the weather will have changed in any case, and I'll have to discuss the weather again. And amazingly, the next day, the weather will change again. You'll have to discuss the weather yet again. And in the summer, when it gets hot, they'll ask, how is the weather? And of course, it's hot. But they need to pass the time by speaking about the hot weather of summer. And when it's winter, they ask, how's the weather? And everybody knows that it's cold. But they use the expression in order to engage in extraneous, irrelevant talk. This is devarim b'teilim. When a person could have instead concentrated his time on studying Torah, he could have learned a Mishnah, he could have learned some Gemara, he could have learned some Tanya, some mysticism, he could have grown in some way, he could have paid attention to his soul, but instead he gave up on that and he devoted his time to irrelevant things. Time passes by. We only have a certain amount of time in this world. Each of us only has a certain amount of time. When the time is finished, it's gone. Were we speaking about the weather, or were we speaking about God? Or were we speaking about doing an act of kindness to somebody? Or were we doing the act of kindness to somebody? Or were we just passing the time by? Then the kaf hakela by itself does not help the soul to cleanse itself and to purify itself. Rather, rak onashim chamurim, only great punishments, shemanishim al bitul Torah bepratos, that they get punished for, meaning in the next world, on account of their idleness instead of involving themselves in Torah in particular. Milvad onesh haklali, and that excludes the general punishment, l'chol bitul mitzvahs aseh, for the sake of being involved in, that they weren't involved in positive mitzvahs in any case. Machmas atzalut, because of laziness, the Gehenim shel Sheleg, and then they have to go into the Gehenim of Sheleg, which is called the Gehenim of snow. There are two types of Gehenims. Probably most people have heard the expression, wow, they say it's hot as hell. Well, sometimes people say it's not as hot as hell. Some people say it's cold as hell. Well, which one is it? Well, the answer is that there are two Gehenims. There are two aspects of this world of hell, let's say. One aspect is the world which is hot, and the other aspect is the world which is cold. Now, in the world that is hot, that is for people who are engaged in aveiras that heated up the body. So people can think about it of themselves. Which aveira is being done that's heating up the body? Well, if that's the case, that goes through the Gehenim of the fire in order to heal it, because it's equal. Everything must be opposite. If one is engaged in one's own activities in a way of fire, in order to commit avera, one must pass through the Gehenim of fire in order to correct oneself. And if one is involved in something which is related to something cold, then one has to pass through the Gehenim of cold, of the coolness, of the sheleg, of the snow. What is an example? Here is the example. Absolute, a person involved in laziness. What is laziness exactly? It means I don't feel like doing anything. I've decided, in fact, not even I don't feel like it. I've decided just to do nothing. You know, it could be, for example, a person feels, he has a great one. You know what I'm going to do today? It's the holidays. So when it's the holidays, for example, one thing that I could do is I could go to the beach and take off my clothes, just have my swimming costume on, and put some sun cream on, and I can lie in the sun for the whole morning doing absolutely nothing. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You don't hurt anybody by doing that, but it's lazy. It shows that the person wants to live a life of something which is really an aspect of a death, because ultimately it might be nice to lie on the beach and absorb this heat. But at the end of the day, after 3 or 4 hours, one hasn't really accomplished much at all in terms of practicality of world activities, of contribution to the world, of contribution to somebody else, helping somebody else out, and certainly not in terms of the tikkun of the world through doing a mitzvah or through studying Torah. Again, we're all different and we all want to do different things in our lives. But think about it logically. When we speak about this idea of atzilut, of laziness, take anything wherever we feel that, oh, why do I really need to do that? I'll just do nothing. Well, that's called atzilut. And the only way that we can get out of that when we leave this world, according to the Tanya, as we see over here, is through the Gehenna of Sheleg, of this hell, so to speak, of the snow, of the coldness, as is brought in another place. We continue. Likewise, a person who occupies himself in the wisdom of the nations of the world. Listen to that one. And that's what I'm doing. Well, what is the wisdom of the nations of the world? Science, mathematics, meaning not Torah. I'm not sitting and studying the Chumash. I'm not studying Mishnah. I'm not studying the Gemara. Instead, I'm studying the wisdoms that pertain to the world. There's nothing really wrong with that. Is there? Well, according to the Tanya, this is Bichlal Dvarim B'Teilim Yechashev. This is to be considered into the category of idle things or idle words, whichever way we look at it, le'inyan avon bittul Torah, certainly with regards to the matter of the sin of that we were not involved in the study of Torah at that point in time. See, we could have been studying Torah. So we went, for example, and we were studying all about, let's say, archaeology. I went to university and I was studying archaeology. So, but I could have been studying Gemara. I could have been studying the Zohar. I could have been studying the Mishnayot or the writings of Arizal or the Tanya. There's so many things I could be studying in Torah, progressing in ultimately repairing the world. But instead, I chose to study archaeology. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Is there? Well, let's see in a second. What do we mean by that? Many people study archaeology. It's fascinating. What about mathematics? It's fascinating also. And what about science? Is there something wrong with science? Surely there's nothing wrong with science. But is there? As the Alter Rebbe points out, he wrote this already in his famous work, known as the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Shulchan Aruch that the Alter Rebbe wrote. And he wrote there in the halachas of Talmud Torah all these principles that we're discussing now. V'od zot yetera, and more, worse than this, is tumasa shel chokmasa umas, is the impurity of the wisdom of the nations, al tumas devarim betelim, on things that relate to, again, devarim betelim, either idle chatter or idle things of the impurity that relates to that. Because this is what happens. That when we speak about these ideas here, they are clothing and making impure only the midot, only the attributes. But we're speaking about, we're speaking about the idea of people speaking just devarim betelim. Almost altumas devarim betelim. That it is worse of the wisdoms of the nations than just idle chatter. Why is it worse to be involved in the study of the nations of the world over idle chatter? Rather be involved in idle chatter, says the Alter Rebbe, because because they only enclose and make impure the midas miyasoid haruach hakadosh shebenafsho, meaning it affects the chesed gevura tiferet netzachod yesod. That's really what it's affecting, all of the emotions of the Holy Spirit in his soul, ha'elokit, of his godly soul. But tumas Kelipah Nogah, through the impurity of the Kelipah Nogah, this middle ground Kelipah, shebedvarim beteilim, through the idle chatter or the idle words or the idle things, haba'im miyasod haruach hara shebekelipah zor, which comes about through the foundation of the bad spirit that is in this Kelipah, in this husk, benafshoi habahamis kedil, which rests in his animalistic soul, as we learned above. However, when a person is speaking just idle chatter, all he's involved in is how's the weather? What's the weather like there? Is it hot? Is it cold? How was it yesterday? What do you think it will be like tomorrow? And he spends his whole time talking these talks. or talking these words. Nevertheless, this is not through the aspect of the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge of his soul. Rather, but these are really words of foolishness and another type of foolishness. Because even fools and ignoramuses are able to speak this way, which means to say you don't need a brain in order to speak words that are just general wasted talk. You don't need a brain to discuss the weather. You don't need a brain to discuss the latest happenings in the world in general. Who won the tennis? Who won the soccer? Who won the ice skating? Well, that's good. Whatever it is that we're speaking about. You don't need much of a brain to discuss those matters. It's just interesting. And anybody can speak about it. Even somebody who doesn't have much education. He too can follow the news and he can engage in a wonderful discussion with everybody about these concepts. And therefore, when one speaks devarim b'teilim, when one speaks this idle chatter, it's not so bad for the soul. And that's why the soul can repair itself. Which is not the case when one is engaged in studying the wisdom of the nations of the world. He's going to enclose and he's going to make impure the aspect of the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge in his soul, of his godly soul. See, when a person is now engaged in studying science or biology, or he's studying mathematics, or he's studying archaeology, or whatever it is, and he's using his head to go about understanding what's happening, he has to remember all these concepts and how it all fits in, and the logic involved, and whatever it is, he begins to use his chabad, his chokhmah, bina, and das. Now, for that, you need some intelligence. I mean, the proof of it is straightforward. When one finishes school and one applies for a course, for example, a person finished his matric and he decided he's going to study medicine. So he applies to the medical school. So the medical school say, well, can we take a look at your marks? And they notice, for English, he got 50%, for mathematics, he got 40%, for science, he got 35%. So they say, yes, let's admit this fellow to medicine. No, they're not going to admit him. They want to see somebody who got 80 and 90% for those subjects. They want to know that this is a person who's got a brain. You need a brain to become a doctor. You have some sense. You've got to have some sort of wisdom in your head. Otherwise, you just can't do it. So the thing is that if a person is going to engage in a university degree, he's going to really pursue the wisdoms of the world. And again, we're saying, is there anything really wrong with that? Let's see, what does that really mean? Because according to the Tanya at this point in time, he's telling us there's a danger. We're immersing our chabad within the science and the mathematics and all these things that we're studying. So what happens is we get the das So what happens is everything gets enclosed over here into the godly soul through the tumah, the impurity of this glowing husk, which is in these wisdoms. We see over here, there's a hint. But tumas klipas noiga, there's a tumah which exists within the realm of the glowing husk within these wisdoms, which means what? If we're talking about the fact that there's a klippah within these wisdoms, what type of klippah is it? Is it the 3 evil klippot? Or is it the Kelipah Nogah? According to the Tanya, we see clearly it's the Kelipah Nogah. Shenaflu shama. And what happened is they fell, the sparks of all of these wisdoms, they fell over there. B'shaviras hakelim, in the creation of the world, when the world was created and there was the breaking of the vessels. Those who aren't aware of this subject, well, basically what happened is when God created the world, he brought a massive light into creation, and the light was exceptionally bright, and it was too bright. And basically, as the light started filtering through and building up various vessels that would be usable in this world so that things could happen, the light was too bright. And as a result of the light being too bright, it shattered these vessels, and ultimately the sparks found their way into the various worlds right down here into this world below. And so therefore, within the spark is an aspect of goodness, but also because it's a fallen spark, there's an aspect of evil in it. Oh, if you can lift up the spark correctly, you'll be okay. But if you don't lift it up correctly, you're going to be in trouble. This could be comparable to, for example, taking a mirror and dropping the mirror on the ground. And we know that as you do that, the mirror breaks up into hundreds of pieces Now, this is quite a thing. And we have to go around, we have to find all the pieces, we have to clear it up. Either we're putting it together again, which is the object of the world. We need to put the mirror back together again. The glass has to be put back together again. Or alternatively, if we're not going to put these pieces back together again, and we're going to be touching the pieces, then what's going to happen ultimately is that we're going to cut ourselves, because as we touch the pieces, we'll cut ourselves. That's going to be dangerous. This is the problem that we have over here with regards to the wisdoms of the world. That the wisdoms of the world are the sparks that have fallen down from the beginning of creation, and our duty is to lift up these sparks. But if we don't lift the spark up correctly, we're only going to cut ourselves. That's going to be dangerous. So he says that they fell over there during the Shvias HaKelim from the aspect of the backside of wisdom, of the holy wisdom. Like as is known to those people who study Chochmas Isteret, those people who study the Kabbalah will know that this is exactly what happens and the danger involved. Unless, of course, he makes it that it's going to be like an axe in order to cut. In other words, to cut with the axe. So, for example, if a person uses the wisdoms of the world, he studies mathematics so that he'll be able to use the mathematics for a purpose that is associated with Torah, then well and good to him. If he's going to use the science in order to enhance his study of Torah, well and good to him. Here, this individual is uplifting the sparks to a higher level. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe is saying it is not entirely bad. There's nothing entirely bad about studying science, biology, and medicine. All these things are actually quite good, as long as one studies it correctly. As long as one uses it for the right purpose, you're okay. That's the Kelipah Nogah. For example, if a person wants to sustain himself from it, with a great amount of money he wants to earn so that he can support his family, la'avod Hashem, and he's going to be able to serve Hashem. Or or he knows how to use them in his service of Hashem, or the Torah, or he knows how to use it for Hashem's Torah. And this is the reason that we speak about with regard to the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, and the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides, and all of the people who were associated in a similar way to these people that indeed did occupy themselves with the study of medicine, mathematics, science. For example, one needs to understand how to calculate all the astronomical calculations within Torah. How do we do the Sod Ha'ibur? How do we know about intercalculating the months? And when do we add an extra month? And how many days are there in each month? And how many hours are there in each day? How many kalakim are there? And so on and so forth. We need to know all the different calculations that go with calculating the Jewish calendar. Now, a person who's a real mathematician, he'll get to understand all these concepts. But funnily enough, a person who's not such a great mathematician will struggle even when he learns it in the Torah. And therefore, studying the mathematics as itself can be a great enhancement and an advantage to understanding all of these things. When it is used correctly, it is uplifted for the sake of Torah, and it goes to a much higher level. When used incorrectly, it becomes something which is negative. For example, a person can become a scientist for the sole purpose of trying to prove why God doesn't exist. And he goes onto television and he does interviews and he speaks more and more about this concept that God doesn't exist. He already holds 3 PhDs that prove all sorts of great things about his knowledge in science. And therefore that goes to show that God doesn't exist, and people will believe him. Then it becomes a dangerous thing. On the other hand, another person might go and study science, and he'll do it for the sake of showing that within science, that is where God is to be found. He shows that within nature, in the mysteries of the chemicals of the world, in the mysteries of the plants, in the mysteries of the animals, in the mysteries of all parts of science that we can imagine, there God is to be found, and he proves it. And therefore he uplifts everything that exists within the realm of science. And even though it is Chochmas Umas Ha'olam, even though it is a wisdom that pertains to the nations of the world, he knows how to use it correctly, and he uplifts it. We now continue on to chapter 9. Let us just read a couple of verses before we end off, just to get a start. We can go back again next week and do a bit of revision. But we've finished that chapter, which dealt with now the 10 soul powers and the 3 garments of the soul. As you remember, that there are 2 basic souls that are in the composition of a Jew. The one is the animal soul, and the other one is the godly soul. And each of these souls has 10 soul powers. As we know, the Keter, or the Chochmah bin Da'as, and then afterwards the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzachot, Yesod, and Malchus. And these are the intellect, the intellectual part of the soul, and the emotional part of the soul. And so too the animal side has both parts to it as well. And then within both levels of the soul, the animal soul and the godly soul, there are 3 garments that cover up both parts of the soul. That means the garments of thought, speech, and action. And within each of those garments, the soul is able to express itself in a way that it reveals who it really is. And that's where we've left off at this point in time. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences before we conclude in chapter 9. V'hine, behold, Makrom Mishkan Nefesh Habhamis. We're now going to speak about an unbelievable subject. The subject that we're going to turn to over here is, since we know about the animal soul, and since we also know about the godly soul, why do I need to know about these 2 souls? Because both of the souls are constantly in conflict with each other. And what we need to know is how to deal with the relationship between the 2 so that we can succeed in uplifting what needs to be uplifted, and in pushing down, causing what shouldn't be uplifted to go down and not express itself. This is the fight, the battle, so to speak, between the animalistic soul and between the godly soul. So, Makro Mishkan Nefesh Abahamis, we're speaking about the place of the animalistic soul, Shemi Kelipah Nogah, and it comes from the Kelipah Nogah, it comes from this glowing husk. B'chol ish Yisrael, in every single Jewish person who believe, it is to be found in the heart. B'chalal smali shehu malei dam. This is in the left side of the heart, which is filled with blood, in the left ventricle. In the left ventricle of the heart, there is blood. The blood is merely the physical concept of the animalistic soul that rests within a person. Okasiv, and it is written, Ki hadam hu hanefesh. It says in Devarim Yud Beis Kaf Gimel that the blood is the soul. The blood is the soul. That means to say the blood in our systems is actually our soul that is moving about in the body. And indeed, when we pay attention to the structure of the body, we see that ultimately everything is geared. All the parts of the body are ultimately geared towards allowing the blood to flow around the body in as smooth a way as possible. The moment there is a blockage of the blood, that's when the damage can occur. And everything that we do in terms of our body is for the sake of the blood. When we are in trouble and we're not feeling well, one of the first things that we're going to do is to do a blood test. And in the blood test, we're going to find out all about ourselves. We know exactly what we've been putting into that blood and what we should have been putting and what we didn't put. Everything is going to be clear from the blood test, because the blood is the soul of the person. Everything of the person is revealed within the blood. V'lachein, and therefore, kol ha'taibes v'tpa'aros v'ka'as v'domehem hem belev. And therefore, all a person's desires and his pride, let's say, and his anger and anything similar to this is to be found in the heart. Why? Because this is the animalistic part of the person. The blood, when we feel angry, it's easy to know exactly what we feel, because the blood starts to boil inside our bodies. We're feeling the blood moving. We're feeling the blood heating up. Well, what about when we feel pride? We feel the blood as well. When you feel proud of something, you get a certain feeling in your body. You can feel the blood flow is taking effect in a certain way. And all different types of desires. Think about any desire that we have. The moment we desire it, the blood begins to boil. The blood begins to move about. This is the animalistic soul that begins to move in our bodies. And from the heart, everything, all the blood starts to move across throughout the entire body. And it also goes up to the head. Shebarosh goes to the mind, it goes to the brain, which is in the head. In order to think about all of these things that are going on, all of these desires that we have. make their way up until the brain, and then afterwards a person becomes wise with it. He starts thinking about the idea. Like a person, like the blood, its origins is in the heart. And from the heart, it begins to extend to all the limbs. And then from there, it goes up to the brain in the head. That's the process that goes on, which means to say that the essential animalistic soul is sitting in the heart, in the left ventricle of the heart. That's where the blood is. And everything that we feel, those emotions, that's the animalistic side, begins to wake up in the heart. And then the next step is the blood starts to flow around the body. And as it flows around the body, it makes its way ultimately to the head. And in the head begins to think with the kabad, the chokhmah and bina and das, all about the ideas of the heart. The heart says, I think I'll be angry. And the brain says, that's a great idea. How do we do it? And the heart says, I think I will commit this particular sin. And the brain says, fantastic idea. How do we do it? Because without the brain, we can't actually put into effect what the heart wants. And the brain is only going to listen to the effect of what the heart really desires. The brain is not thinking at this point in time, let me change your mind. Because when we speak about the animalistic parts of the soul, the brain is there just to enhance what the animalistic soul wants. I will do your bidding. I will help you out. You want to be angry? I will teach you how to be angry with my chokhmah, bina, and das. You want to be a gaiva-dika person filled with pride? I will teach you, says the brain, how to be that type of person. And so on and so forth. We've reached the end of our Tanya Shiur for today. And I thank you very much for joining me. My name is Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet. You can find my site at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed the shiur, please do like the video, make a positive comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Feel free to make a positive comment. Share the video with your friends, family. Let them know what we're doing. We need to get these videos out to as many people as we can. And of course, I'm always available if you'd like to be in touch about anything, Torah or life. Feel free to email me, or alternatively, come and join us for a shiur like we're doing here live. There are people in the shiur. You're welcome to join us, or alternatively, for a one-on-one private lesson. I would be happy to teach you a subject of your choice and work through it like we're doing over here as a textual-based shiur and understand the concepts. We're going through a tough time at the moment, as everybody knows, with the coronavirus. If you're having difficulty and trying to find a program for yourself and keep busy and things like that, be in touch with us. We'd be delighted to try and offer some assistance and help, and just to bring some growth and perspective to the situation that we're all going through. In the meantime, I say thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you everything of the best. And I say shalom, shalom, bye-bye. Looking forward to another shiur. Bye-bye.